people with real jobs.
Hello?
Self-employed people. Which do you want to be? This is Certifiably Unemployable. It's time to fire the boss and become self-employed. Maybe you need a push to get that business or side gig going that you've been dreaming about for years. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can listen to stories and get experience from people who've done it. Get ready to change your life. Broadcasting from the compound, this is Certifiably Unemployable, and this is Sean Dean.
Welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. I am your host, Sean Dean, and thank you once again for joining us on another week episode on Certifiably Unemployable. Of course, if you're looking to fire your boss, maybe you're already self-employed. Everybody has a story, and every story is different. And I hope something from this episode this week resonates with you. So while you're listening, if you're on Facebook, you're on YouTube, make us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, and don't forget to like, so that way you do not miss an episode of Certifiably Unemployable. So this week, it's all about the road less traveled with Clarity Coach Kyle Grappone, and he's our guest this week. Now, Kyle is the founder of To the Next Step, which is a clarity coaching program that helps individuals discover and pursue their passion and career purpose. He believes that everyone deserves to enjoy the career they work in. He also believes that individuals should have the opportunity to take control of their future and change their path forward if they choose to. Over the past few years, he's been interviewed he's actually interviewed and has spoken to countless individuals who speak about wanting more out of life, but somehow they fall short of taking action, one reason or another. His company was founded to help people cut through the noise, gain clarity about their purpose in life, and take the next steps they need to get there. Kyle, welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, and thank you for that introduction. I really think I might hire you to follow me around and do that more often, because I think you just explained my business a lot better than sometimes I explain it myself.
Hey, Kyle, everybody has a price tag, my friend. I'm good.
Yeah.
No, sounds good. Sounds good. My pleasure. So you and I were just talking. You're based out of the United States. You're in New Jersey, and so tell us a little backstory about Kyle and what brought you from becoming self-employed and getting into the industry you're in.
Sure. So this is a bit of a long story. So if at any point you want to stop me and ask a question, just give me the high sign and we can go in a different direction.
Right.
But basically, I guess, this story, honestly, in earnest, probably started about a good 15 to 20 years ago when I was much younger. And I was basically in high school and college. I was really not somebody who tried very hard. I think when I was in school, I subconsciously realized that a lot of what I was learning wasn't going to translate for me. I think I kind of always knew that I was going to go down a different path. And therefore, high school, my memories of high school were, joking around, chasing girls, just, having fun, going to get pizza at 2:30 every day, stuff like that. And, I didn't really think about it. And I got into college, which honestly was probably the worst thing that could have happened, because if I had gotten rejected from colleges, they probably would have had me wake up a little earlier. But, I got into college. And again, I was just more of the guy who just wanted to have fun, who just wanted to have a good time. I got decent grades. I passed everything. I've never really failed anything, but I've always kind of done just enough to get by.
Right.
And I entered the real world 10 years ago, corporate world in 2010. And I really had nothing. I didn't know how to interview because I never really took the school up on the courses they were offering or the things they were offering. I never really learned how to do a lot of that stuff. So eventually I did find my way into marketing. I did get a marketing job because that was something I was interested in. But I kind of realized pretty early on that I don't want to sit in a cube. I don't want to sit in a cubicle. I don't want to sit at a desk. And again, I have no problem with people who do that. I think there's a lot of careers out there that, you can make a lot of impact by working at different types of companies, if that's for you. For me, it's not for me personally. And I just think that I realized a few years in that that wasn't for me. But more importantly, I started to realize that a lot of people I worked with were just unhappy. They were just unhappy with their jobs. They were unhappy at work. They were, they would say things to me like, "Oh, is it Friday yet?" That was the thing that always got me. It would be Monday or Tuesday, and they'd be like, "Is it Friday yet?" And I'm like, No, like, why are you asking that? Until you kind of realize that they're asking that because they hate where they are during the week and they
Right.
want to escape into the weekend. And you're wishing your life away when you do that. So not only did that bother me, but it kind of like got me thinking. I'm like, why are people like this? So what I did was I started to do a lot of research and I started to realize that a lot of people didn't properly prepare themselves for the real world. They didn't know what it was going to be like. They didn't know what working full time was like, how much time and energy goes into it. And a lot of people wish that they could kind of go back in time and kind of take a lot of things more seriously. They would have, chosen a college more seriously, or maybe they would have went to a trade school instead, or they wouldn't have taken out those loans. Loans is a big thing. I think there's a lot of people who are in a lot of loan debt because they didn't understand how loans worked. They were kind of under the impression that they had no choice. They had to take out loans. They had to go to college because maybe they weren't kind of afforded the other opportunities. They weren't presented those opportunities. So I started to think to myself, what can I do that, one, will solve this problem, and two, solve the problem of me wanting a career that's outside of an office. So I honestly started as a youth motivational speaker. I originally started, and my whole career plan was I was going to be a professional speaker, and I was going to talk to high school and college students. And I had some success with that. Eventually, I wrote a book, which you can see over my shoulder, which is for high school and college students, preparing them for the real world. But what I was finding was, one, the education market is very difficult to break into. And now with COVID, I don't think, assemblies will ever be the same. I don't think you're going to, I know you're not going to see them this school year. And to be honest with you, I think what's going to happen with public speakers, especially in schools, is that money's getting allocated towards something else. And whoever gets that money now, they're not giving that money back.
Right.
So it was a perfect storm of that. The fact that I was working with a lot of people who honestly were older than college students. They were in their 20s and 30s, and they wanted some sort of clarity. They wanted to figure out, I want to change careers. I didn't end up in the right career. I didn't end up in the right job, or I want to start a side hustle to make some money, or I want to start a business, or I want to leave my 9 to 5. So I kind of pivoted. And then the third part of that was also that I started building up a pillar of my business where I would work with entrepreneurs on their branding, their messaging, their copywriting, because a lot of people had an idea, but they didn't know how to tell that idea. They didn't, they have a product, but how do I tell that story instead of just putting up a website and saying, here's my products. So I was helping and I still do help a lot of entrepreneurs who have the clarity in a sense of what do they want to do, but now need clarity in terms of message.
So that's kind of message. Yeah. That's common. I know that's a common thing with entrepreneurs is that we've got that blockage. We know what we want to do. We know how to execute the product, but we don't know how to convey the message to the people.
Exactly. And I think that that's something that I can help with and something that I kind of, can be a part of. And that's what I'm trying to do in my business. So I can take you from, if you have an idea, all the way to, helping you execute that idea and getting it out to the people.
Okay. So how long were you in the whole corporate America structure then before you realized I can't do this?
I mean, I think my first inkling was probably about 3 or 4 years in.
Right.
But what I was doing was I was kind of moving the goalposts on myself. And I was kind of saying, well, I'm not happy here because I want to be working in New York City. And then when I was in New York City, I'm like, well, I'm not happy in this job because I want to be running my own department. And then when I was running my own department, I'm like, well, I'm not happy because of this. So it was really, probably 3 or 4 years after that when I finally realized that the actual problem was that I needed to completely get out of the corporate world. And honestly, the idea of being an entrepreneur was kind of the last piece of the puzzle because I never thought to myself, I have to run my own business. My idea was always, I want to do my own thing. And that ends up being running your own business. Right. But there's a story that I love to tell, and I think it would really resonate with your listeners. So I was working a job a few years ago, and I hated this job. And the only part of my day that I actually enjoyed was my hour lunch break. I would walk around a business park for exercise, and I would walk around this massive pond. And as soon as I got to this job, I was trying to get out of it. It was one of those. So I remember saying to myself, if I'm walking, it was the springtime. I said, if I'm walking around this pond during the summer, I'm going to be really upset. And sure enough, I got a new job. And that job, again, it wasn't fitting my needs. I quickly was unhappy. I started going for a walk on a lunch break. And what do you think I found? I found another pond.
Right.
And I had that epiphany where I was like, there will always be a pond. Like if you keep going down this road, Like there's always going to be a pond. So instead of trying to make that half step, instead of trying to rationalize, well, if I could just make this small change, it's really about making that massive change. And it's really about realizing that, there's always going to be, in my case, there's always going to be a pond. Means you're always going to be, if you work in corporate America, you're always going to be miserable 8 out of the 9 hours of the day. And for other people, that pond may represent you're always going to be stressed out. You're always going to be not making as much money. Whatever it is, there's always going to be that pond, so to speak.
Right. No, it's a great story because people need to understand that there is a better way of life than that 9 to 5. And, with all due respect, we grow up. That's what we're taught. Get a good job, work 40 hours a week for 40 years. And hopefully, well, it's really not 40 years because you do the math. That's never going to work. However, long enough to then hopefully you can live off of something that you realize is no longer there. The schools aren't teaching that. So as a young entrepreneur or as a younger entrepreneur, I mean, I don't think I'm old, I'm 44 right now, but as a young entrepreneur, that's what we need to do is we need to just convey that message. And if we can't only convey it to our kids, then we've got to be able to convey it somehow. So the fact that you were a motivational speaker and you spoke to the youth, I think that is very commendable. And you've got a book that resonates with that. So of course we will talk more about that. So was it because of your story personally that made you want to speak to the youth, or you just felt you could connect with them better? I mean, what were you thinking there?
I think it was partially my personal story. And I think, my personal story of not really trying that hard, not being prepared, not wanting other kids to kind of waste their opportunity. Though it is interesting because if you really do look at it, if I had tried my absolute hardest in high school and college, I would have gone down a totally different career path, and I don't think I'd be doing this today. So in a weird way, it worked out for me. But for every one of me, there's 10 people out there that are struggling because, they entered the workforce behind the 8 ball, and then they never really were able to recover from that. Because, if you don't make the right steps into corporate America, it's very difficult to recover from that. Because then all of a sudden, you spend a couple of years in the wrong industry, now you're pigeonholed, and that's what you are, and that's where the money is, and that's where the experience is, and all that other stuff. But I wanted to speak to the youth because I didn't think a lot of people were speaking to them,
right,
about this. I am very encouraged that these days there are, and I don't know if this is nationally adopted, but I do know of high schools that do offer classes on entrepreneurship, that offer classes on learning social media. How to advertise on social media. So it does seem like some of that is penetrating, and that's great for those kids.
Right.
But we need to talk about this large group of people who are out of high school and are in this world. And also, I feel very strongly that there's a lot of people, this world's got a lot of problems. And I think that there's a lot of people who could solve those problems. And I think it's a shame because I think they have the skill and the potential and the idea. And I think those things die with them because nobody ever pulls it out of them. One of the things that I did when I started this was I surveyed a lot of people, and I asked them a question. If you could have any job, not if you didn't have to work, you still had to work, but if you could have any job, what would it be? And most of the people answered the question with very reasonable jobs. People were not saying they wanted to be actors. People were not saying they wanted to be astronauts. They were reasonable jobs. But then when I asked the follow-up question, why aren't you doing it? It was, a lot of it was, well, maybe I'll do it someday. Well, that means you're never going to do it. A lot of people are like, well, this is where my experience is, or now I have a family. So it's like, it's a real shame to me because there's one person I always think back to, and she's in an office job and she wants to be an interior decorator. And like, that's not a crazy job. Like, that's not like if you were to come to me and be like, I want to be, president. Well, okay, good luck. That's a steep climb, but interior decorator is reasonable. Like that can be accomplished, but if you don't know what to do and if you don't have anybody, the problem is like not only do they not have anybody pushing them towards it, not only do they don't have anybody pulling it out of them, but they have this society that is literally, anytime anybody has the audacity to do anything a little different, society is all of a sudden like, here's a million reasons why it's not okay. And to me, that's just mind-boggling. And that's why I try to create a lot of my content around not listening to other people. I mean, I just recorded a podcast episode that's going to drop in a few weeks called Be Careful Who You Let In. And it's about the opinions that you let in and really kind of minimizing the amount of opinions that you let in because, I always say, if you haven't done it, I'm not really interested in hearing about your opinion on it.
Yeah.
Like if you haven't done it, like if you haven't written a book, don't tell me how to write my book. Now, if you're my target audience and you want to say, hey, here's what I would want to read, that's fine because that's a different type of feedback. But don't tell me, oh, you should only have 10 chapters in your book. Well, why? So I think
Right.
that's pretty important too.
No, I agree. And, you brought up a good topic or a good point about everybody's an expert, right? Years ago when we had first started one of our businesses, we were in the event business for many, many years. We started as a DJ company. Then we went into full service event planning and things of that nature. Well, when I started as a DJ, doing a lot of private parties, weddings, and things of that nature, technology really started taking upon itself. You got the iPod, and now everybody's a DJ. And of course, everybody knows a DJ, and everybody's the expert. And so I would have to educate my clients before they booked me. And I'll be like, listen, you don't know that you made a mistake hiring the wrong professional until it's too late.
Yeah.
You want to find out the day of your wedding that your DJ came drunk, or he wore blue jeans, or he's hitting on your bridesmaids. All come to think that he's doing this just as a side hustle to make a few extra dollars. Now, I'm not saying just because you're doing a side hustle, you're not a professional, but in that industry in particular, dime a dozen, you found them all the time. And then you'd have these brides that were like, well, we have to go off a price. And then once you say, well, let me call you the Monday after the wedding happens and I'll ask you how it went, then they start thinking, you know what, this guy might have a point. So you're right. You don't want to listen to just anybody. One of the things I wanted to ask you was simply about that. If you've got somebody that right now, whether they're younger or maybe they've been in corporate America for 15, 20 years and they've had enough and they're not sure what they want to do, but they know that they have to get out of that 9 to 5 because they're 100% unhappy. Do you have a recommendation for them if they just do not know what to do?
Well, my first recommendation is to sign up for a free coaching session with me. That would be my first one.
Okay.
We'll put the link in your show notes. But my first recommendation is, even if you declare I'm going to leave my 9 to 5, get in the mindset that you're going to be there for another 1 to 2 years. Now, maybe it'll be shorter, but I say that because there really isn't a scenario where you can, for most people, where you can just quit your job. And I'm not talking about the people who might maybe have a trust fund or maybe people who don't have a lot of bills. I'm talking about most people. I think it's difficult and dangerous to think that, oh, I'm going to leave my job in 3 months. Now, if you're miserable, maybe it's time to find another job where you can be less miserable because that's going to help your mindset and you're going to be a little more positive for when it's time to work on that business.
Right.
But once you kind of realize I'm still going to be here for a year or so and get that settled, I tell people, I talk a lot about passion and I get annoyed because people one of the things that people love to do for some reason is they love to find articles about that say something like, don't follow your passion. And then they love to send it to me. And I just stopped responding to people because I don't say follow your passion. I say discover your passion. And that is different because what I tell people to do is I want you to think about who do you want to help and how can you do that? That's kind of, I think, and it's more in depth than that, obviously, but that's a starting point because that's how you discover what you're actually passionate about. Because I tell people all the time, I'm very passionate about football. I watch NFL football every Sunday. However, I would never want to work in any industry that was related to NFL in any way because that means I couldn't watch the NFL. Like the other day, Jerry Seinfeld was asked, why wouldn't you buy the Mets? And he was like, because if I buy the Mets, then being a Met fan isn't fun anymore. I mean, being a Met fan isn't fun, period. But, the point he was getting at was it's not fun anymore. So I don't tell people, oh, find what you're passionate about. Who do you want to help? Because if you're looking for something, that is to me where you're going to find success. If you're solving somebody else's problem, the products that work are the ones that solve a problem. I always tell people, I was like, when I work with my branding clients and we talk about messaging and sometimes they push back on the direction I want to take, I tell them, I said, You need to reach in to that consumer and you need to figure out what is their problem, what is their issue, and how are you going to make their life better. And that's it. And that's really what it's about. It's not so much about how great this product is and the ingredients and stuff. It's about what is that product going to do. So I would tell people, figure out who do you want to help? What are the different ways to do that? And what kind of skills do you already have? Like for me, for example, I've never enjoyed any marketing job I've ever had. However, I've spent 7 years writing content, creating branding, creating strategy, and I love doing that for clients. So, one of the reasons I pivoted was because as a youth speaker, doing branding for entrepreneurs, those are two totally different things. But as a clarity coach for older adults, helping people build their brand is something that kind of goes into it. So that's the biggest thing I would say. But then also, we're kind of going down the rabbit hole, but I also preach a lot about mindset. And I think you really need to get into a new type of mindset if you're going to have any chance to make a big change. Because what I try to explain to people is that your brain is designed to keep you safe. It's not designed to make you happy. It's actually designed to keep you safe. So if you're doing something that it perceives as dangerous or unknown, if it's just unknown, it's going to try to push you over to safety. That's why a lot of people can't lose weight, because your brain is never going to say, oh, the safe thing to do is go to the gym, because you're pushing yourself at the gym. You're out of breath at the gym. You're tired at the gym. Your brain is never going to prioritize going to the gym over sitting on the couch. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
You kind of have to push through that. And I think people need to understand that mindset. And the last thing I'll say on the topic is people have to understand that whole rush of here's my idea and then launching the idea and then having everybody like your post and subscribe to whatever, that's the first step. And there's a lot of steps after that, because once everybody kind of throws the confetti in the air and says, hey, this is great, best of luck, they go back to their own lives. And that's when the real work begins. And I think for a lot of people, starting a business is a lot of work after the thrill of starting has actually ended.
You got a lot of people out there that are unhappy doing what they're doing. And you hit the nail on the head with, if you're miserable and you've got to make a change so you then can have some clarity in your brain and think about what you're going to do to move forward. There's so many opportunities nowadays, more so than ever with the side hustles from Lyft to Uber to Shipt to Postmates. You literally can download an app and get to work the very next day just by doing certain things, just by turning on the app and saying, hey, I'm available. You can go hang a ceiling fan. I mean, there's so many things you can do. So if you really are miserable and you really, truly have to get out of doing what you're doing, then you've got to make the modification so that way you can focus on the next thing. So that leads me to how to change careers. If you're doing that and you make the shift, how does one change careers if they're unhappy here and they need to do something else?
I think it's really about, again, going back to finding that purpose, discovering that passion, and then thinking about, what are you doing now in your role that can translate to something else? If you are working at an insurance company and you hate insurance and you're like, I got to get out of the insurance industry, I challenge you to take the insurance part out of it. What do you do every day? Well, I talk to clients every day. Okay, client communications. Customer service. What else do you do? Well, I make sure these people get paid. I make sure that this gets here on time. Okay, that sounds like project management. So now all of a sudden, maybe you should be thinking about project management. So now all of a sudden, if we're looking at project management, now all of a sudden you go on a website called Catch a Fire, which is a website that nonprofits go onto because they can't afford to hire people, and they'll take anybody. So you have some project management experience. You offer to be their project manager. You're doing something good. It feels good to help a nonprofit. It looks good on a resume. And now you're starting to build that experience. If you're somebody who, like I have a client who is in law enforcement and he just wants to leave law enforcement. He doesn't want to do it anymore. And I've told, he's like, I don't know what to do, because he goes, I look at these office jobs and I said, whoa. I said, first of all, you're not getting an office job. I said, you could if you wanted to. I'll hire anybody for sales. But I was like, for you, you shouldn't be looking at office jobs. What you should be doing is you should be positioning yourself as somebody who can be trusted, because you've been put in charge of people. He worked a number of years as somebody who is an armed guard for, the cash trucks. So he knows that, conflict resolution, communications, trustworthiness. So those are all things that somebody's going to want. So now all of a sudden, you could go to a UPS and yeah, you might not have, delivery experience, but they're going to look at you and be like, this guy was a cop, so he's trustworthy. And I also feel comfortable giving him, $1 million worth of packages, even though he's not going to be armed. I just feel more comfortable because he's going to be somebody that I think can handle himself.
Right.
And also, you got to look, sometimes if we're being honest with ourselves, sometimes being a reliable person is half the battle, because a lot of these companies, they cycle through these unreliable workers. A lot of companies have workers that just don't show up. I mean, that's foreign to me and you because we were raised a different way.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there are companies, I'm sure today a boss came in and somebody just didn't show up and probably ghosted and was done, because it has, happened before.
No
so
call,
I think,
no show. Yep.
Exactly. So I think the main thing is you have to think about kind of what kind of qualities do you have. Don't necessarily pigeonhole yourself and think that, oh, nobody's going to, I don't have experience in that industry. If you're reliable, if you have a certain amount of skills, but it's also about, can you build some sort of side hustle? Can you do some sort of volunteering, and kind of position yourself that way? Like one of the things I told my client was, if you leave law enforcement, there's nothing stopping you from getting a job with UPS, but then become a security guard for a couple of nights a week and on the weekends. But you got to get on that mindset that, for 6 months, you're going to be working a 60-hour week.
Right.
But you're already doing that as law enforcement. So, now all of a sudden you save up all that money and now you get promoted at UPS, but I also told him, I said, also UPS isn't forever. Maybe you work at UPS and you do something else, a couple of years down the road. Don't think that whatever you do next is going to be your ultimate thing. So I think that's what I try to tell people.
Yeah. And you got to be able to have that self accountability, which a lot of people don't have. And so that brings me to the next thing. What about an accountability partner? I mean, how can accountability partner benefit somebody? And, is there a solution to that if someone's looking for someone to be accountable?
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, one of our taglines on the website is accountability, because that's what I am for a lot of people, an accountability partner. Because the bottom line is that it's impossible to wake up in your 20s and decide that you're going to hold yourself accountable, because you've never had to do that before.
Right.
We're raised kind of in like this like consequence zone where we do things to avoid a consequence. Like when you grow up, you do things because you don't want your parents to yell at you. And then when you go to school, you do things because you don't want your teachers to yell at you. You don't want your teachers to fail you. And then you go to college and you don't want your teachers to fail you, so you do what you're told. And then you go into work and, it's like, for a lot of people, if I don't have a job, then I don't have any money. So I'm going to do as I'm told. And I think a lot of people get into this mindset of, I'm only going to do what I have to do. I'm only going to do what I'm told. So if you don't assign it to me, I'm not going to do it. Because the other problem with corporate America is if you come up with an idea, you screw yourself, because now you have to execute that idea and nobody else wants to help you because they don't want to do extra work. So a lot of good ideas die because nobody really wants to open their mouth. So now all of a sudden you want to be an entrepreneur at the age of 25 and you spent 25 years with the mindset of, I'm going to only do what I need to do, you're screwed. So what I try to do is I try to be an accountability partner, and where I meet with you once a month or every 2 weeks, depending on what we decide. But every Monday, you have to email me, and you have to email me your to-do list for the week. You have to create that to-do list. The only thing I can do is tell you, move this, move that. This is a waste of time. Okay, if you're going to do this, check out that website. And it basically helps you become, independent, because I'm holding you accountable. But basically, by the end of it, you're then in a mindset where you're going to be able to hold yourself accountable. But, I mean, that is one of the things. Like, I'm a clarity coach, but I also call myself an accountability partner because, as an entrepreneur, nobody's going to make you do it, And I think that's the biggest thing, because if you have that steady paycheck and you have that job, where's the urgency? And I think for a lot of people, there is no urgency until you one day are like, I can't do this anymore. And then sometimes it's too late.
So we're talking to Clarity Coach Kyle Grappone about the road less traveled. Basically, folks, we're talking about helping people discover that there is another way of life besides being miserable in that 9 to 5. And so before we wrap this up, of course, I want to talk a little bit more about what you can offer the listeners. you had talked about setting up just a free session with you to talk about it. Because maybe if you're listening to this right now and you're like, you know what, Sean, Kyle, you're right. I am super unhappy and I have no clue what to do, where to go. I've got some ideas, but I really don't know what I want to do. Or maybe you just feel like you're trapped because you really have done nothing more. You know, I've got a good buddy of mine, and I've told this story on the show before, but I'm going to tell you real quick, Kyle. Him and I have known each other since 8th grade. We're the same age. You know, actually, he's just a year older than me. But he worked for a company here locally since his age, since he was 20 years old, he worked for them. And he worked for them for 23 years. Then all of a sudden they decided they're going to shut down, close plant, right? And that's all he knew. He worked there for over half more. He dedicated over half of his life. The company offered him a $1,500 severance package to stick it out to the end. $1,500. Yeah, he was able to build up a 401k and he got paid whoop-de-doo, right? So he didn't know what to do. And he really struggled with that for a while. Now he's found something that makes him a lot happier because he was super stressed out. And he was stressed out and unhappy there for so long. That business closing, as much as it seemed like a tragedy at the time because it affected a lot of people locally here, it was a blessing in disguise for him and I'm sure many others because they were miserable, and it was the same thing over and over again. And so now he's doing great and everything else, but there's a lot of people in that position that are super unhappy. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn to. So Kyle, tell them what you're going to offer our listeners. If they mention they heard it on Certifiably Unemployable, we're going to put a link on the show, just like you had mentioned. What will they get for that?
So they'll get a couple of things. So right off the bat, they're going to get a free coaching session. And what I really want to make clear is that this coaching session is not me trying to pitch you. I mean, at the end of it, I will send you information about additional coaching packages because I think they're going to help you. But what we do is we talk about where you are, where you want to go, and the first steps you need to take to get there. And to be honest with you, if that's the only time we ever talk, you will get value out of it. And I think that's something that's very important. It's an hour long. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's less. If you don't have an hour to talk to me, that's fine. But I offer an hour because I always say, when I was much younger, I remember going to a psychologist for some whatevers, and I hated the fact that I knew I was on a timer. And I don't want people to feel like they're on a timer. That's why I block out an entire hour for you. So you can click the link that we give. You can go ahead and sign up for the free coaching session. Also, I also am going to give you a link to a course that I've created. And it's very cost effective. It's $50. It's an on-demand course. It's called 30-Day Side Hustle. And 30-Day Side Hustle is going to help you take the side hustle idea in your head and bring it to reality. And if you have no idea what you want your side hustle to be, that's what we cover in the beginning. We cover exactly how to find out and how to figure that out. So if you have an idea, great. If you don't have an idea, that's fine too. And everybody who buys that also gets a free coaching session. So, my suggestion would be, if you have $50, check out the course. If you're interested in a side hustle, I would check out the course first. I'd purchase the course and then take me up on that free coaching session, because a lot of times people will take the course, get their questions answered, and we're done. But a lot of times they'll take the course and then I'll help them with the branding aspect, the marketing aspect of it, which is important. But if your side hustle is not really what you're thinking, if you're thinking more like I want to change careers or I want to start a business or I just need to figure out, I need to take all these ideas, we need to throw some in the trash. We need to excuse some because they're not going to work and really focus on the one or two that is. That's what the free session is for.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that's great. Great advice. Super, super, super fantastic for you offering that. Kyle, is there anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up today's episode?
No, I think that's it. I think, my biggest thing as I tell people is it's great to listen to a podcast like this, but it's really about what you do afterwards. Because, I can't hold your hand. Sean can't hold your hand. But I will say this, no one is coming to save you. Nobody's coming to save you from your life. That's the brutal truth of it. Nobody's going to save you. I'm not going to save you. I can help you, but you have to save yourself. And you have to do that by signing up for a free coaching session. Because I'll be honest with you, if you're unhappy at work and you're not going to give me 1 hour to get that ball rolling, then I'm sorry, but I have no sympathy for you.
Right.
I understand if maybe you don't want to buy a course or maybe you don't have the money for a coaching package, but 1 hour, that's a Netflix episode. So it's really going to be up to you. Are you going to take me up on this? Are you going to write down what I said today? Are you going to keep listening to Sean's podcast? And every time somebody comes on, take one thing out of it and commit to, I'm going to do the one thing I learned today. Are you going to do that? Because if you're not, I don't know what to tell you then, because nobody else is going to come to save you, because this is it. There's never going to be the perfect time. The stars are never going to align. And honestly, there's always a reason not to do something. I mean, this morning was a perfect example. I get up every morning 6 o'clock to work out, and today I didn't do it. And I made a bunch of excuses. I slept in, and I've regretted it all day because nobody was waking me up. Nobody was forcing me to do it. And that's how it is with business. That's how it is with any type of change. So that's kind of my closing remarks. A little bit of tough love because I think sometimes it's needed.
No, I agree, because I'm the same way. We're all human beings. And at the end of the day, you're right. There's no one that's going to be out there to save you. And in many cases, it takes an outsider to point out what is broken, because you're used to seeing it all the time. You're used to living it all the time. And that's one of the reasons why we started Certifiably Unemployable, was not for me to just talk about all this stuff about being self-employed and to have guests that talk about all this stuff, but I also learn every single day, every person I talk to, because I know as a human being and as an entrepreneur, we have to continue to grow. We have to continue to learn. We have to continue to hold ourselves accountable. So Kyle, thank you so much. And thank you for being on Certifiably Unemployable. We appreciate that.
I appreciate you having me on.
All right. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss an episode. And I know you know somebody that needs this message, so don't forget to share it with them as well, okay? You're listening to Certifiably Unemployable, and until next time.
You've been listening to Certifiably Unemployable. Ready to fire the boss yet? You're on your way. Sean has been self-employed for over 20 years. So if that's something that you want to do, something you've been dreaming about for years, Sean has all the knowledge, good, bad, and indifferent. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook and Instagram at Certifiably Unemployable. Find us on YouTube and at www.certifiablyunemployable.us.net.org and .info. Till next time, this is Certifiably Unemployable, signing off.